Oh, hello everyone. So, Matt, firstly, thanks for inviting me here. Actually, as part of just preparing for this, I tried to look back as to thinking it was 2 or 3 years since we first met one another, and I think it's now going on for 5 or 6 years. And actually, I was going to touch on that first piece of evaluation that you did, because that really set the stone sort of trundling along. In the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes, Matt, I think that's how long you'd like me to talk for. Yeah, I guess I want to talk about 3 things. I suppose you'd like to know who we are, then I guess who, what do we focus on, and thirdly, what matters to us. There'll be interplay between those 3 things. So who are we? We're a charitable trust. I've been a trustee of that trust now since 2008. I've been sort of trying to shake my way out of it, and over the last year in particular, but we just seem to find other reasons to keep going. As much as we sort of want to spend our money and come to an end, we keep seeing new needs emerging. We tackle and help to tackle social disadvantage. We'll have at any given time, we don't call them a portfolio, but they're essentially a portfolio of 10 charities and or social enterprise. There'll be commonality across those, which will come out when I talk about what we focus on. We look for multi-year relationships where we will provide finance. We'll look for it to be a catalyst where it can be. And we'll be looking at a minimum of 3 to 5 year relationships. We just don't see the point of 1 year. And actually, Matt, we're coming up to 3 or 5 years, but I think we've got a good 3 or 4 more to go. So yeah, you'll definitely be getting into the sort of top quartile of relationships there. And I guess when we started out, I was young and arrogant. I thought I could impart some great things to Matt, and then of course every time I have anything to do with trust links, I'm just humbled by all the different things that I take away. We like our support to be two-way. Firstly, we don't just provide the finance, we do provide and try to provide other areas of support, whether it's technology, whether it's strategy, whether it's hooking and connecting up. Of course, the money plays its part. But conversely, if we're not entering into a relationship, then we can't move information back the other way to the other 9 or 10 organizations that are directly in our network and then in our broader network. So it's got to be two-way. And I guess, and Gareth has spoken today, and Gareth and Tracy Gareth in particular was one of the first people that I met, and had a background in the early part of my career with fixing broken technology projects. And one of the things that struck me straight away with Trust Links when I was looking at the monitoring and evaluation, it was an exemplar. In fact, it was almost I could count them on one hand and I'd have plenty left over, of great implementations of software. It didn't even know how good it was, and that just sort of really rocked me as to this is an interesting organization. What do we do? We also focus on occasionally commissioning research, only where we think it's relevant to the second question, which I'll sort of now go on to. That's a bit about who we are. We focus on 3 areas, and actually, as it happens, the only time we've commissioned research has been in support of those 3 areas. The first area I'm going to touch on, and I think for many of you who've spoken about how do we get involved and maybe implement equivalent programs to Growing Together, we look to scale micro and small charities, the innovators, the disruptors, and we could use terms like blueprints and codification, but really it's just great practice, great M&E, really good and strong operating models, all the different component parts that come together, that don't guarantee success, but they certainly lay the foundations for it. And we'll look at how that sort of scaling has been undertaken. And with Trust Links, one of the things that immediately jumped out is the incremental and geographic disbursement was so smartly done, because we were working with a much larger horticultural charity, and we actually thought we'd impart some information from them to Trust Links when we first got involved, but very quickly realised that wasn't the case, and actually it really should have been going back the other way. This organisation based in Reading, London, then Gateshead, and then over there, and it was all very, very difficult to manage. And what we found with Matt and the way in which he was looking at scaling was really making baby steps were getting an incredibly long way. So as the first area of what we focus on, can the organisation scale? The second is mental health, and that is really looking at different areas of interventions within mental health. And this was an area we focused with research in 2016, which again overlaps with why we like Trust Links, in that we commissioned some research in this area as to where evaluation was being disseminated and used by other organisations. Trust Links prepares it, somebody else uses it. And what we found was certainly a wake-up call, in that it wasn't being disseminated anywhere near as broadly enough. And there was a massive reporting bias. The good stuff was getting out there, the bad stuff wasn't. And that was what appealed to me, because the 2013 M&E, the Monty evaluation that Matt mentioned just now, that wasn't a glowing endorsement of everything. It actually revealed a whole bunch of things that weren't right. And Matt just approached them, and the team just approached them with, well, this is what we've got to focus on. So we look for mental health as a second area. And the third, and I have to say, this is again an area which we are struggling with a bit, and it's the transition between children's services and adult services. And we commissioned some research with New Philanthropy Capital back in 2008 when I first got involved with the trust, and it really shone a spotlight on what was an already cliff edge for a lot of people with a whole bunch of challenges, and there's only been an unwinding of even that, whether it's local authorities and otherwise. So what we focus on are, can it scale, mental health and how it approaches, tackles those issues, and transitions in particular from children's to adult services. So really the final sort of question was, what matters to us? And look, Matt, you do some great stuff, but I'll pick you up from time to time on bits and pieces. This is one hell of a report, well worth reading if you hadn't read. I mean, you'll learn an enormous amount, and I certainly did. We want monitoring evaluation to drive service improvement, and we want that to be 90% of the story, because if it's not doing that, then what on earth is it really doing? Who's it satisfying? Me? I don't want to know. I want to know how it's helping members, which I happen to love, Matt, the switch from service users to members. So does this has, where it is improving service, but probably this has way more than most, but most people produce M&E really to satisfy funders. And we talked to them about, well, how is it embedded throughout the organisation? And the reality is, of course, it often isn't. It's produced over there and doesn't figure across. Well, I happen to know that actually from those early conversations with Gareth, working with Tracy, and actually seeing the way in which Matt distributes responsibility, not just to members, but actually to everyone. It's all part and embedded into the culture, is that actually the M&E is driving service improvement. But when we look more broadly at supporting organisations, if they don't really share that culture, we'll walk away, which is why we walk towards Trust Link. The second is, for goodness sake, please stop this obsession, charities, with programmatic funding. We only give unrestricted, and we only say, spend it how you like, but please invest in the core. Please invest in infrastructure that is actually going to enable you to scale. because we can fund the programs, but if we have this frontline obsession, then we will never really fix a lot and innovate in the same way. It needs to be a balance of the two at the very least. So we really emphasize that. So we are now working, well, supporting and learning from the guys at TrustLinks, Tracy and others, who are effectively building this replication model so that it can go beyond South Essex, hopefully a very long way around the country. And that requires that sort of second area of focus. The third and final area of what matters to us as a trust is joined up connections between the trustees and the executive and what's going on the ground. And that you could call that governance, and I guess it is called governance. And it terrifies me the amount of times I've just asked a basic question to a charity. Also, you know, can I give, you know, of course I answer it with a little throwaway like, oh, could you tell me what the trustees thought of that? Oh, we haven't told them. Right, okay, bang. Okay, that's a strategy document that you've put in front of me. Why has that not gone to the trustees? When's it going to the trustees? What is your governance like? Oh, we just replaced them all. Right. Okay, you've got some serious governance issues to be dealing with here. So, you know, that's not to say we aren't going to support you, but please, you know, bring those governance issues to the fore, because a few throwaway questions around governance has revealed that actually the infrastructure that you need to do what you do best might not be there if it's not working across your service users, members in the case of TrustLinks, and your trustees as well. So when we look and work with an organisation, and the ones that we want to stick with and really work with them through to the point where they don't need us because they've got into a sustainable model, the governance is typically always just, you could ask a trustee, whether it was Keith, I think, on the Treasury, or any of those guys, and if they answer it in the same way and they share the language and the vernacular and everything else, then you're thinking this is an organisation that top to bottom is going in the same direction as one. And when we look at, you know, what matters to us, these three specifics of M&E that drives service improvement, really investing as much in the core and the infrastructure and the central bits as the programmatic. And then the third one is looking for the telltale bits of governance that might be weak, and encouraging improvement if it's close, or actually having to walk away if it's not. So yeah, I sit here having realised we're into at least the 5th year of our relationship, and I think, you know, you're a good chance of breaking the record, Matt, and delighted to have been asked to contribute.
Great, thanks ever so much, John. That was really, really helpful, really fantastic